Welcome back to Gerodynamics. Okay, so this is a more of a political video. It is talking about the movie Civil War, but I'm going to list this as a political video. It's kind of a follow up to the movie review I gave for Civil War. This will probably have a little bit more in the way of spoilers in it, but that's not the point of this video. But if you are trying to avoid spoilers for the movie, then maybe wait to watch this video until you've seen the movie, and then you can kind of see my take on it and see see how it goes or clashes against your take. Um, but okay, so just to get that out of the way, there may be some spoilers in this video. I mean, there kind of will be. So, all right. Okay, so Civil War, the concept of the movie is more focused on these photojournalists than the actual Civil War. But you do get some hints about things that have happened prior to the movie and throughout the movie. So the character Nick Offerman plays the president. Does he have a name? I didn't even look at that during the last video. Um, his character is just president. that's that's about right. That sounds right. You don't know his name. You don't know he's president. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. His character is not in the movie a whole lot. At the beginning of the movie, he's preparing to give a speech, and so he's trying to prepare like he's running his lines basically, which is interesting. We'll get into that a little bit more. It's like he's running his lines, but they presidents have speechwriters, right? So is he kind of just like the face of it, the figurehead? That may be kind of what they're hinting at, as opposed to actually being in charge. And then throughout the movie, you kind of hear some radio broadcasts from him where he's giving updates and continually asking for the secessionists to surrender. And then at the very end of the movie, the photojournalists and the secessionist forces make their way into Washington D.C. There's a huge battle, but the U.S. military has not not surrendered per se, but the U.S. military has stepped aside and said, "You can take him. We're not going to defend him, and so we're not going to fight you. So you can take him." So the U.S. military kind of steps away and doesn't take part in this fight, but it is still a pretty big fight. I'm assuming just from the Secret Service and the Capitol Police, and he must have some form of militia as his personal army, because there's definitely some fighting like that. But in the main portion of it, they finally get into the White House after thinking that he's busted out of the White House, but then they stop the vehicles, or physically force them to stop, and find out he's not in the limo. Um, so they bust into the White House, and they're going, room to room. They're having a shootout between them and the CIA, or not CIA, Secret Service. They finally get to the press conference room, and a Secret Service agent is there saying, she's unarmed. She's just there to negotiate, to to try to, you know, say he's willing to surrender and he's going to hand over the government, but that he wants to be, he wants to survive. Basically, he wants to be given passage to another country or something, so that he can just be not not killed, basically. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that, bring him out here. And she was like, no, no, we need to negotiate. So they take her out, and then they go and they fight their way back to him. And so the final scene, and I'm not even giving away entire all the spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet and you still want to see it, go see it. I'm not going to spoil everything, but I mean, this is a big spoiler. In the final scene, one of the people who've been traveling to try to interview him asks the soldiers to stop. to wait, and so they hold up just a little bit, and he's like, I need to get a quote from him. So he asks the president for a quote, and the president's like, don't let them kill me, and he's like, that'll do. And they kill him. And so that's how it ends, basically, is, the president has been killed. The secessionist forces have taken over. I'm assuming, what you can probably assume is that they take over the government from there. Whether they reinstate everything moving forward, the Constitution and the presidential elections and everything else, as it was prior to, I don't know. Um, and here's the thing: the reason for the Civil War isn't explicitly given, but there's this one scene in the movie where they're saying, well, what kind of questions are you going to ask him, because he'll have you killed, right? He doesn't do interviews, and what are you going to ask him? You're going to ask him, why did you take a third term? Why did you bomb U.S. citizens? Why did you um, oh shoot, what was the third big one? It was, why did you take a third term? Why did you bomb U.S. citizens? And something else, and I'm not remember it. Sorry about that. Um, okay, so um, this is my take on it. I could be wrong. The director and the writer could have had a different thought in mind. Um, but what they do is they have Florida and not Florida, Texas and California are the secessionist states, right? It's the Western Front. It's a military secession, so it's an actual civil war. Some of the states seem to try to be staying out of it and not picking a side. The president has obviously taken over extended his powers beyond the typical powers of a president. He's obviously violated the Constitution by taking a third term. If he did it through an election, then he shouldn't have been on the ballot. So if he did it through an election, then obviously the election was compromised. And so, if you're looking at it from our current political dynamics, in what way could you possibly see California and Texas teaming up to secede? There's almost zero chance of this happening in our current climate, but there is one way that I could see it happening. Um, and I mean, not that this would happen, but I'm saying that if this is our, and it's not some multiverse thing, some like, or just a fictional story, but say it's in our actual United States of America. Here's what I see. Um, you have not a Donald Trump type, because he's very popular, like a populist, right? Um, but the president would need to be a Republican, or at least not a Democrat, because and don't this is my personal opinion. I don't think California would secede no matter what a Democrat president did. Just take that opinion. You can disagree with it. No matter if you had President Biden, or some future Democrat president do any of this stuff, I still think California would defend them. A Democrat president taking a third term um, would be rough, but I think that California would not secede even if that happened. So it would have to be a Republican president, and if it was a Republican president taking a third term, then obviously, yeah, I could see California seceding, or trying to, trying to do some sort of coup, or try to, remove him from office somehow. Um, but I also see, you know, just because he's a Republican doesn't mean Texas would stand for that. Um, Donald Trump might be a little different, like story. Like I said, I don't think Donald Trump would do that, but a lot of people think, especially Democrats, think that he could do something like that. I don't. I think he probably would have in 2020 if that had been his mentality. But that's a whole different topic altogether. But if it was, say, just some standard, say Donald Trump took a more like a neocon, or more like a traditional Republican as a vice president, and then he became the president afterwards. And then for some reason he took his first term, he won his first term, won re-election, and then says, you know what, we're 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 gonna keep going, and ran for a third time, and somehow was able to get through even though it was unconstitutional. I could see Republicans revolting against that, especially like Texas type Republicans that are open to the idea of seceding. Um, I could see that possibly happening. That'd be the only scenario that I could see where California and Texas would legitimately side with each other. And maybe that's what they were going for when they wrote it that way, especially pointing to the fact that he took a third term. But I don't know that for sure. It could just be completely fictional. That that obviously it's not the same Texas and California we have today, because they wouldn't have teamed up together in any possible scenario. Um, but in this fictional world, they do. Okay. Then there's the Florida Alliance, which is loosely connected to the Western Front, but they're not connected, right? So it's kind of like the Western Front's coming from the west, and then Florida Alliance is coming from the south, and they kind of meet up at Washington D.C. and move in to Washington D.C., right? Um, so a lot of people are upset about this movie because it doesn't take a side, because it doesn't really go into saying, blaming anybody. Um, is it all the president's fault? Who knows? Did they secede before he took the third term? We don't know. So that could be something that completely throws my theory off. Is if Florida and Texas seceded together, and so because they seceded, he took a third term, even though it was not constitutional. That could very well be the premise of the movie, but they don't tell us. Um, and then uh, bombing U.S. citizens, obviously that would cause people to turn against the president, even if people were seceding. I think there would be large groups of people that would disagree with the president bombing them, even if they seceded. So, again, not blaming either side, not trying to say, oh, this is obviously Republicans that are seceding, and it's some Democrat that's trying to keep the country together, or the other way around, some Democrat trying to keep the country together while uh, or Democrats seceding because there's a Republican president, and the Republicans just trying to keep the country together. It doesn't do either one of those things, right? Neither side is the good guys. Um, and so some people are really upset about that. They want it to be more of a critique against current situations, more so Democrats wanting it to be a critique against Republicans. I don't really see that so much from the Republican side of things, saying, oh, obviously it would be a Democrat taking all this power. And so, of course, the Republicans are going to secede if a Democrat president takes a third term. They wanted it more to be like what's a cautionary tale about what's happening now. Really, what it is a cautionary tale about war, and you can tell that from the main character's perspective. Is she was a photojournalist. She was always reporting on the front lines, and the purpose for her reporting was to warn people back home and really across the world that you don't want to do this. You don't want to go to war, because war is brutal and wrong and evil, and nothing good can come from war. That's kind of her perspective. And I think that's what the movie is trying to tell you also, without taking a side, without trying to be divisive, And when you don't pick a side and you're not divisive, you still kind of end up being divisive in this current climate that we have. And so, but they did a really good job, I think, of balancing that and trying not to upset like a whole half of the country. And I think you'll enjoy it as far as that goes. Um, but let's kind of take a look at the wider concept of civil war. And I hope you take away the same thing that I took away from this, which is, of course, we absolutely do not want this to happen. We do not want a war in this country. We don't want to have, the forces of, a coalition of states fighting the forces of a coalition of states that has not seceded. So, kind of like our original Civil War, the South seceded from the North, seceded from the Union. And so the North went into the South to force them to rejoin the Union, right? That's kind of what happened with the Civil War. And so we don't want to see that happen again in the current climate. But we know we have such a divided culture and a divided political climate here that we could see something like that happening, which is really sad. And so we hopefully will avoid the war aspect of it. But I do, and of course my perspective is that we should be looking at the possibility of separating the country without war, though. If Because if we can't reconcile, if we're so far gone as far as a divided nation, could we then instead agree to divide the country and come to terms on that so we could avoid a situation like this where we go to war? It would be very difficult, but it could be done. And that's what I think maybe we should do. We should maybe start considering it, to make sure we avoid going into a situation that looks more like this movie. Um, that's my take on it. I would like to hear your take on it. I definitely still want to do more videos talking about what could be the outcome of a civil separation, or a civil or a civil, what do they often call it, a anyways, I'm forgetting the term. But basically, where the country agrees to divide itself. Um, and I call it a civil separation, but other people call it a national divorce. A lot of people call it a national divorce. And so that's something that we may really need to start taking very serious, at least putting really serious thought into it, about the process of moving forward with that. And then we could kind of just go our separate ways and do things the way that would suit us better as a nation. That's something I will be doing more videos about. I know I will eventually. Every time I try to do the video, I kind of get lost in my thoughts, and it becomes more of a ramble than an actual video. So hopefully I can get those out and get those put together for you guys here at some point. But what did you think? What did you think about this movie? Did you think it did that? Rode the line of not being overly offensive to anybody? What do you think about the idea of a civil war versus a civil separation? How do you guys think we could do that? And is it something you think we should do? All right, everybody, leave your comments down below, and I will talk to you again very shortly. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.